Good evening, brethren. Tonight we're going to study NejemYah chapter 5. So I'm going to start with verse 1. NejemYah chapter 5, verse 1. And there was a great outcry of the people and their wives against their brothers, the Yahudim. And there were some who were saying, we, our sons, our daughters, are many. Let us get grain for them and eat and live. So, and there were some who were saying, we, our sons and our daughters are many. Let us get grain for them and eat and live. And there were some who were saying, we have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses. Let us buy grain because of the scarcity of food. So I'm going to go to the previous chapter and read the last couple verses. At that time, I also said to the people, let each man and his servant spend the night in Jerusalem, and they shall be our guard by night and for the work by day. So neither I nor my brothers nor my servants nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us took off our garments, each one his weapon, even at the water. So we saw how this connected with the end times. They were doing this at nighttime, and they had their tool in one hand to build the wall, which represents the chosen few in the end times, building the new Jerusalem, the new uh, world, or pretty much establishing the kingdom of Yahweh on earth, while some of their brothers are against them and the doctrine with excuses and a bunch of other things. While on the other hand, they had a weapon because we are in a spiritual battle. We already saw all of that in last chapter. So continuing, we see how now it goes into a famine that happened. Just like in the end times, the third seal will be a famine. There will be hunger on the earth, mainly that of the prophet Amos, which has to do with um, spiritual hunger, a hunger for the word of Yahweh. As we know, Yahushua is the word, as we read in Revelation 19:13. The name of the Son is the word of Yahweh. So Yahushua is the word of Yahweh. Yahushua said that the word of Yahweh is the seed. So when we see here, it says, and there was a great outcry in the people and their wives, of the people and their wives against their brothers, the Yahudim. So we see how the people were against each other, just as nowadays, the few will be hated by the many, while they are all or should be the same people, for they all believe in one sovereign, Mashiach. So then it says, and there were some who were saying, we, our sons and our daughters are many. Let us get grain for them and eat and live. And there were some who were saying, we have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses. Let us buy grain because of the scarcity of food. So this connects with the third seal of the end times. So it follows the interpretation that we were seeing on the previous chapters. Not only that, it really connects with our time. For as we know, they are forcing a lack of food, because they are even paying people to destroy that which they were growing, and they are stopping a lot of the food from going to the stores. So they are creating a famine, which obviously is a lot worse than a natural one. For imagine the punishment that will come to those who are actually making or creating a famine on purpose to depopulate the earth, while the Almighty and the earth are given food, but they are destroying it. So, and there were some who were saying, we have mortgaged our lands and vineyards and houses. Let us buy grain because of the scarcity of food. And there were those who were saying, we have borrowed silver for the sovereign's tax on our lands and vineyards. We have borrowed silver for the sovereign's tax on our lands and vineyards. This shows also how a lot of people are in debt nowadays. They have mortgaged their houses, their lands, in order to be able to survive. That has been going like, well, for a long time, but nowadays it's getting worse, of course, because of the new uh, world order that they are establishing, or the Great Reset, as they call it, what they're doing at the moment. And there were those who were saying, we have borrowed silver for the sovereign's tax on our lands and vineyards. And now our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. And see, we are subjecting our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters have already been subjected, and there is no power in our hands, for other men have our lands and vineyards. So look how they have no property, as they are trying to abolish property worldwide eventually, through the crash of the economy, through creating poverty, and then bringing a solution which will be something similar to uh, communism, communism or socialism. And also, it's interesting how they talk about their sons and daughters, and we see the movements that the governments are doing around the world to um, well, inject that poison in children and threatening their parents with taking their children if they don't do so. So we see here how it says, and now our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. And see, we are subjecting our sons and our daughters to be slaves. And some of our daughters have already been subjected, and there is no power in our hands, for other men have our hands and vineyards, our lands and vineyards. For other men have our lands and vineyards. And it was very displeasing to me when I heard the outcry and these words. And my heart ruled over me. And I strove with the nobles and with the deputy rulers, and said to them, you are exacting interest, each one from his brother. This is something that is a sin according to the law, according to the Torah, mainly in Israel amongst brothers. We are not supposed to loan with interest. In fact, through mercy in the new covenant by Mashiach, we are told that if we lend somebody anything, we shouldn't expect it back. So here they were making a business of their brothers, like banks. They were giving money, but taking interest. So here NejemYah is defending his brethren and going against those in power. So, and my heart ruled me, and I strove with the nobles. Interesting how it says, and my heart ruled over me. Let's see, verse 7 here in Hebrew. Vayimalech, they be like. So here, if we were to only take these three letters, that would be Melech, which is king. So that's why, and it ruled my heart over me. And that makes a connection between heart and the king, the Melech. Just like David, the king, had a heart like Yahweh's heart. So as we know, the last comes as a Melech, just like Mashiach came as a Kohen, as a priest. The last comes as a king. Just like Mashiach would be the brain of the congregation, the last would be the heart. So first and last as brain and heart, as priest and king. So here we see a connection between ruling, the ruling of the king, and the heart. So, and he ruled my heart over me. So going back to verse 7, and my heart ruled over me, and I strove with the nobles and with the deputy rulers and said to them, you are exacting interest, each one from his brother. And I called a great assembly against them and said to them, according to our ability, we have redeemed our brothers, the Yahudim, who were sold to the nations. And you even sell your brothers, or should they be sold to us? And they were silent and found not a word to say. So NejemYah complains that the people of Israel had been redeemed from exile from Babylon finally, and now their own brethren, through the interests that they were charging, were enslaving the people. For as we know, one who owes money is a slave of that person to whom he owns that money or whatever he owns. A person who has a debt is a slave to whomever he owns that debt. So that's why it says, according to our ability, we have redeemed our brothers, the Yahudim, who were sold to the nations. And you even sell your brothers, or should they be sold to us? And they were silent and found not a word to say. I also said, what you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our Elohim because of the reproach of the nations, our enemies? And also I, my brothers and my servants, am lending them silver and grain. Please let us leave off this interest. Here we see NejemYah acting in a way like Moshe. For instance, when he was asking for the Shabbat for the people when they were slaves of Pharaoh. So he went to the leaders of Egypt and asked for Israel to be given the Shabbat, a day of rest from slavery. And eventually he brought the redemption, of course. Here we see, but sadly, NejemYah doing it from his own people, needing to talk to his own people and tell them this. And also I, my brothers and my servants, am lending them silver and grain. Please let us leave off this interest. Please give back to them, even today, their lands, their vineyards, their olive trees, and their houses. Also, the 100th part of the silver and of the grain and of the new wine and of the oil that you have taken from them. And they said, let us give it back and ask no more from them. We do as you say. Then I called the priests and made them swear to do according to this word. I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, let Elohim in this way shake out each man from his house and from his property, who does not do this word, even to be thus shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said, Amen, and praised Yahweh. And the people did according to this word. So, like I said, Moshe asked for the Shabbat and he received it for the people. And eventually, in a way, Moshe interceded and was able to redeem the people from slavery in Egypt. Now we see NejemYah asking to his own people, but those who were in power, to relieve Israel from those interests and many other things, as we see, so that they were able to receive their lands and be able to um, eat pretty much. So verse 11, once again, please give back to them even today their lands, their vineyards, their olive trees, their houses, also the 100th part of the silver and of the grain and of the new wine and of the oil that you have taken from them. This is interesting because we saw how in the beginning there was a mention of scarcity of food. There was a famine, pretty much. And I mean, connected to the famine of the third seal, there may not have been a famine in the world, but because of their lack of means, they had a lack of food, which also connects with our time because it is how they are doing it. There is food in the world, but they are destroying it or hiding it so that people cannot get it, and the population will be greater than what the injections are causing. So, and they are blaming it on the people who don't want to get the injection, by the way. So we see here that he's asking for everything to be given back to the people, and they are receiving it. So that, in a way, also connects to how when there was a plague in Egypt, the people would be fine, and they actually, when Egypt was in darkness, they had light. When Egypt had blood for water, Israel had water. So here we see how there was scarcity of food, but Nehemyah's intercession was able to bring them their property, which they had lost back in the day, to as nowadays to the banks, to the powers that be, pretty much. So, and they said, let's give it back and ask no more from them. We do as you say. Then I called the priest and made them swear to do according to this word. He needed to make sure that that would be a fact. So I also shook out the fold of my garment and said, let Elohim in this way shake out each man from his house and from his property who does not do this word, even to be thus shaken out and emptied. And all the assembly said amen and praised Yahweh, and the people did according to this word. Also, from the day I was commanded to be their governor in the land of Yehudah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of sovereign Artashasta, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's food. So this similar to the time when Daniel goes with his brethren, his three friends, and they are given the food of the king, but they reject it because it was sacrificed to the idols. So here we see that he was given authority as a governor, but he didn't eat like their leaders who would be eating things that they shouldn't. Obviously, that which happened back in the day is a representation of nowadays. For instance, when people would eat things sacrificed to the idols, represents how nowadays people receive teachings that come from the demons, doctrines of demons. Those demons are the idols which they worship, who lead them through those false doctrines. So it says, from the day I was commanded to be their governor in the land of Yehudah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of sovereign Artashasta, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's food. Also, obviously, the 12 years connect with the 12 tribes, 12 months of the year, the 12 disciples Then it says, but the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Their servants also oppressed the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of Elohim. Pretty much NejemYah came to change things and how they were uh, handling the people back in the day. As for instance, nowadays, once again, how the governors take advantage of the people, but then Yahweh will establish a kingdom that will be just, that will be fair. So the former governors who were before me laid burdens on the people and took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. 40 shekels connected to the 40 jubilees from the first to the second manifestation of the Almighty on earth. 40 jubilees are 2,000 years from the first coming to the last. So took from them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Their servants also oppressed the people, but I did not do so because of the fear of Elohim. And I also worked strongly in the work of this wall. We did not buy any land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. And at my table were 150 of the Yahudim and deputy rulers. At my table were 150 of the Yahudim and deputy rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. 150, when it comes to the letters used in Hebrew with the numerical values, would be the kuf and the nun. The kuf is the only letter that goes down from the line, just like the lamed is the only one that goes up, and the yud is the one that pretty much floats. So the kuf represents the entrance to heaven, and also coming down from heaven, descending from the heavens, as well as the end of time. For in the pictographic, it is a sun on the horizon. While the nun represents a fallen one, in the negative, a fallen angel, like the Nephilim, which starts with a nun, but in the positive, the prodigal son, or any person who has fallen in sin and then repents. So 150 could be connected to he who comes down from heaven in the end times, descending from Nun. Nun is the letter with the value of 50, but it's also the name of an ancestor of the last, because the last comes from Joseph, from Ephraim, from Nun, from Yahushua, known as Joshua, Yahushua ben Nun. So the one who descends from the heavens in the end of times as the prodigal son, a descendant of Nun, and obviously other things we could see through those two letters when it comes to what the number 150 would represent. But I'll continue. And it says, and on my table were 150. Let me do something real quick. There's another interesting time in scripture in which the 150 is mentioned. Here it is in Bereshit, or Genesis 7:24. And the waters were mighty on the earth 150 days. So the flood lasted for 150 days. As we know, the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah, when the flood, but now of fire, would come. First to test spiritual fire, and then to burn a physical fire during the first 3.5 years, and then the last 3.5 years. So, and the waters were mighty on the earth 150 days. I repeat, connected with the flood. So now going back, it said, and at my table were 150 of the Yahudim and deputy rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. So like I said, this connects NejemYah to the prodigal son descendant from Nun and from the heavens in the end times, as well as with Noah, who was on the ark during those 150 days mentioned in Genesis regarding the flood. So, besides those who came to us from the nations around us, and that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. Imagine how much food. And that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox. Here we see NejemYah connected to the ox. As we know, the last is the ox sacrificed on Yom Kippur, just like Mashiach came as the male goat of Yom Kippur when he was placed next to Barabbas, and also as the lamb of Pesach when he was obviously sacrificed on Pesach. So, and that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox, 1 like NejemYah, the ox representing the last, like NejemYah, and six choice sheep. As we know, the sheep, let me just see real quick in Hebrew. Echad shor would be the 1 ox, shor being the ox. Then we have echad son sheish, which would be 1 flock of 6 berurot, which would be their sheep. This right here could be seen as bar, and bar is son. That's why it was interesting when Mashiach was placed next to Barabbas, which means son of the Father. Yahushua is the son of the Father Most High, and the people were asked to choose from the son of the Father or the son of the Father. Obviously, 2 different fathers. Yahushua, the father, Yahweh. Barabbas, his father was Satan. So Mashiach, as we know, came as a lamb, which is a son of the sheep. Well, the kid of 1 year that would be sacrificed for Pesach, as we see in Leviticus and Exodus. Also, Sheish, or 6, as we see, is written with the 2 letters shin, which represents fire, like the fire of the end times. At the end of the sixth millennium, just like that's the number 6, and it represents a double portion of fire. And the end of the 6th millennium would be through fire. So then it says, and birds, which is interesting that they would prepare birds, not something that we see commonly. So that stands out. And as we know, birds represent the malachim, the angels. And that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox, like I said, represents the last, the leader of the 144,000 sacrificed on Yom Kippur. 6 choice sheep, which would connect with the 144,000 that are chosen at the end of the 6th millennium to start the Shabbat of Yahweh. And birds like the Malachim that are subjected to Mikael, the last. So, and that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep, and birds were prepared for me. And once every 10 days, these 10 days, like the 10 days of the 2 witnesses in prison, the 10 days that are from Yom Teruah, that start from Yom Teruah and go all the way to Yom Kippur. And once every 10 days, plenty of all kinds of wine, which represents um, um, joy. But in this case, remember how I mentioned the ox that is sacrificed on Yom Kippur on the 10th of the 7th month. The 10 of the 7th is Yom Kippur. So interesting that it says the ox, 10 days, plenty of wine. And wine represents blood, like the blood of the lads and Eliyahu that will be shed on the 10th day after the ox is captured and taken from the sheep. And then he says, and in spite of this, I did not seek the governor's food. So even though it was so much food and good food that everybody would want and desire, it says, and in spite of this, I did not seek the governor's food because the bondage was heavy on these people. So he didn't want to rejoice so much and live so good while there were so many people living so bad, so many of his people. He saw it, of course, as a disrespect. And also it is something that would make him pretty much blind to what they were feeling and going through by him being in a completely different state. So, and in spite of this, I did not seek the governor's food because the bondage was heavy on these people. Oh, my Elohim, remember me for the good, all that I have done for these people. So pretty much saying, remember my sacrifice by not taking any of this because of these people. That's how the chapter ends.